To inform you that the government has now committed an amount of $12 million for a national advertising campaign to provide information to the public, both through television and print, about the government's policies and plans for establishing a carbon price. Of course, there's been
a campaign before you get the carbon tax deal?
As long as it conforms with the guidelines and there's an announced policy, yes.
So, but if you don't have a deal with the Greens, how do you know what you're advertising?
Well, I think it depends on the content of the advertising, of course, but the government has every intention of trying to conclude an agreement with the other members of the MPCCC. And as I said a moment ago, no final decision will be taken about the national advertising campaign until such time as we've worked those issues through further.
So that means you won't spend any money until after you get the deal with the Greens?
We've committed the $12 million. We're endeavouring to finalise an agreement, as you're aware, and the government will take a final decision about an advertising campaign a little bit further down the track. Engaged.
You might not get a deal. You might not get a deal, and you might not have anything to advertise.
Well, we have every intention of getting a deal, and we're obviously going to work extremely hard to achieve it. I mean, this is to come back to the basic issue here. It is extremely important that Australia takes action on climate change. It's important that we do it at the lowest cost to our economy, to households, to communities, to businesses. It is a complex economic and environmental reform. There's been, I think you'd have to agree, a very significant degree of community debate about the issues, and it is appropriate for a government in these circumstances trying to finalise a policy position, then to forecast that we would conduct an advertising campaign to explain that to the community.
Minister,
those kind of time constraints.
For a carbon price, as I understand it, although you're being a bit nebulous, if you're trying to educate people about a carbon price, that is the government's policy. The opposition is opposed to that. You don't have an agreement. You don't have a legislation, you don't have a bill, there's no law. Why isn't this just utterly political, and why shouldn't the ALP be paying for this advertising?
Well, it's not political. Under the campaign guidelines that the government is working to in respect of this advertising campaign, it's perfectly appropriate for a government to explain policy positions, and that is what we're intending to do.
Obviously, under the advertising guidelines, you require an existing policy or legislation in order to advertise. Wouldn't you be breaching those guidelines by advertising before you have a policy agreed to by the MPCCC?
No, the government is entitled to provide information about policies that it announces. And for example, well, I've indicated that we've committed funding towards an advertising campaign with a final decision yet to be made, pending further discussions. And we anticipate and are working very hard to achieve a policy outcome through the MPCCC.
What's wrong with your government's message, Minister? You're announcing $12 million. You don't know what you're advertising, you don't know what it's going to say, and you're deferring to your department. What are you actually announcing?
I'm announcing a commitment of $12 million, which I think you might have appreciated, and in fact, that we've made a decision to commit $12 million to an advertising campaign. A final decision won't be made subject to those two things. There's going to be further discussion about the policy package through the MPCCC, but there'll be conformity with the guidelines. I think that's an appropriate thing for us to indicate.
The sea talks, as Martin Ferguson said, are they in danger of falling over if the adequate compensation some want for the steel and coal sectors is not reached?
Well, again, it's not appropriate for me to speculate about what we're discussing within the MPCCC. There are obvious areas of policy difference and policy emphasis that you'd be well familiar with from the past, and we've just got to keep working our way through them. But everyone's at the table and everyone's approaching it in good faith, trying to get an outcome.
Minister, just on the advertising campaign, is this like the MRRT campaign where the government had to seek an exemption, or
no,
it'll be in line with the...
No, it's not, and I think now for the 14th or 15th time I'm emphasising that there will be conformity with the government guidelines on campaign advertising.
Last question, please. Approval of the independent body which vets advertising before you proceed.
Correct, and the department has consulted with the independent committee along the way to date, I've been advised, and the independent communications committee would have its role under the guidelines properly applied if this advertising campaign proceeds.
Minister, there's speculation.
Appropriate for the government to defy the will of the Parliament on the issue of the Malaysian refugee swap?
Oh, look, we've got to finalise the policy formulation for that, and I'm certainly supportive of the policy position. I think we all know the reality of the House of Representatives makeup, and from time to time there's going to be decisions of this nature. However, the government's very committed to the policy and we'll see it through.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So it's the